Welcome to VTA's public meeting on Next Network. I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Lynn Hong. I'm in public relations for VTA. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us this evening. Before we start anything, I just wanted to let you know the exits are obviously out this way to my left. And then the restroom is directly at the doorway and to the left. And then you need to take another left to get through. And I wanted to make some formal introductions. We have to my left is Adam Berger, our project manager for this project. Sitting over here on this table is Jason Kim, who is a transportation planner. Our manager of scheduling is Kermit Cuff, who is right here. And then over here, we have Jay Tyree. And then Cody Kratz. Jay is a transportation planner, and Cody Kratz is our administrator of social media. And over there we have Trisha Pontu. So she's our transportation planner as well. I'm going to facilitate this meeting as best as I can. I am sure this crowd is rowdy, so watch out, I'm going to get in. But without further ado, here's Adam.
All right, thank you, Lynn. So this meeting is in person, but we're also live streaming it. So I'll be asking you guys to hold any questions that you may have to our discussion periods so that we don't interrupt the show that's going on online. I am the project manager for the Next Network Transit Redesign, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'll be going over the project purpose, first and foremost, then getting into what we call the ridership recipe, talking about transit choices and our network concepts at 3 different points in this presentation. We'll be asking you to give us feedback. The first time will be a group discussion, and the second and third times will be through some live polling. So individuals who are watching online can also participate in the live polling. We'll get that up and let you know how to connect. So I want to talk about trends first of all. We looked at the last 15 years of transit statistics in Santa Clara County, and we found that there's been about a 12% increase in population. So that should be new riders, new people coming into VTA to ride our system. But what we've actually seen is a 23% decline in ridership over that time. We bottomed out around 2005, 35% decrease, and we've come up to 23% since then. But one of the reasons we think this is happening is because the amount of transit service that we provide has declined over the past 15 years. The cost of living in Santa Clara County is high and has been rising, and that's been reflected in the cost of labor for our drivers, for our maintenance workers, for our staff. That makes it more expensive per hour to provide transit service, and we haven't really increased our transit budget over that time. In 2015, we spent $320 million on bus and light rail, which is about the same inflation-adjusted amount as we spent in 2001. So no additional money plus a higher hourly cost means that we can only afford to operate fewer hours of service. Also, our FAREBOX recovery rate has been poor. The FAREBOX recovery rate is the portion of our operating cost that we pay for through fares that we collect from riders. VTA is that red line at the bottom, and as you can see, we're lowest among our peers, and we have been that way for quite a while. That means that transit trips in Santa Clara County are the most heavily subsidized among large agencies across the United States. I'm getting pressure from my general manager and my board of directors to improve that mark. So we've talked about increasing ridership, improving our efficiency in terms of our cost effectiveness. The other big impetus behind this transit redesign is connecting with BART. In the fall of 2017, we will begin BART service to the Milpitas and Berryessa BART stations, and we project that not too long after that, we'll have 23,000 trips coming through those gateways, combined coming and going. And right now, the VTA service that connects with those locations is inadequate to handle that demand. Those riders are going to want to get to a lot of the employment centers and activity centers in San Jose. We know we'll have to redesign our system somewhat in order to accommodate that. So altogether, this gives us an opportunity to redesign our entire transit network, and that's the focus of this meeting. So normally when we redesign our networks, we'll start around the fall of the previous year, around December, and we'll look at our ridership statistics. We'll look at what the comments and complaints are that we've received, as well as guidance from our elected officials, and we'll design a new network. after you do that, after several cycles, you sometimes end up with a network that starts becoming too specialized, that's lost its entire concept behind the network. So it's healthy every 10 years to really start from scratch, and that's what we're doing this time around. So we're spending an entire summer here gathering public input, 5 months of community meetings and online surveys to really see what the community wants so we can give that information to our board of directors, and so we start off our redesign as a community-powered project. We'll take all the input that we get at this meeting and many other meetings we've been having throughout the summer, and we'll share that with our board of directors in the fall. They'll give us some guidance about how we should proceed on our network redesign, and we'll turn that into a draft network that we'll be able to share in December of 2016. That will spark another round of public outreach where you'll be able to see our proposal and let us know what we got right, what we got wrong, what we could do better. And at some point in the spring of 2017, we will have our board adopt a new 2-year transit service plan, our next network plan, that will go into effect in the fall of 2017. So I'd like to take a break at this moment to ask you guys to discuss with VTA staff, and for those of you online, you can discuss in the comment box. I'm asking you, do you ride transit? If so, why? If not, why not? And ask you what VTA could do better. I want to hear from you how we can improve, understanding your perspective. So we'll do a bit of a group discussion, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, so we are back in our group discussion. We heard comments about frequency, about the hours of trips, about the accommodation for individuals who need to use the ramps on board our vehicles, about public safety and how VTA has handled past incidents, and a compliment about the bike storage on the new 522, if I could say so. So the next portion of this presentation is to talk about the ridership recipe. So I mentioned in the last half that my board is telling me that I need to increase transit ridership. And we know how to do that. This is a formula that works pretty much everywhere in the world where it's been employed, and that is frequent all-day transit service in areas that follow patterns of density, walkability, linearity, and proximity. And I recognize that that's a bit planary and technical, so I'll break that down. We talk about frequency because frequency has a triple benefit to our riders. First, it's always coming soon, which is nice. You don't need to consult the schedule. You go right out to the curb and just wait. If you're making a transfer to a route, it's a lot better if that route is frequent because you know you won't have that long of a wait while you're waiting for the bus. A 15-minute route is great, 15 or better is great, but half-hourly or hourly routes can make for very long transfer times and can take up so much of your time that it makes transit no longer a worthwhile choice. Also, with frequency, you get reliability. The more frequent the service, you know that if something should happen to your vehicle, if it breaks down, if something happens, the next one will be along not too far after that. We also talk about all-day service, and this is because we find that transit riders tend to have a different commute pattern than auto drivers in the county. Transit riders tend to be lower than average in terms of income. We also have a lot of students, and transit riders tend to be in income levels where they have service sector jobs. Those are jobs like restaurants and retail where the 9-to-5 Monday through Friday shift isn't all that common. We're also finding that in looking at our own ridership data, we don't see big surges in ridership in the morning and evening commute periods. Rather, the time of day when we have most riders is between 2 and 3 in the afternoon. That's when our buses are most crowded, and it's actually at a point during the day when our service level dips a bit. So that's when we're most crowded. When we talk about density, that's simply the number of people who are within access of the transit route or the transit stop. You can look at these graphics. Each of these routes costs VTA the same to operate, but the one that has many more homes and activity centers around it is going to give us more ridership. If we care about ridership first and foremost, we'll want to put more services in denser areas and concentrate frequency there, as opposed to areas where there's less density and therefore less potential transit passengers. Walkability is another big concern. The design of the street network around the transit stop can really affect how many destinations are within easy walking distance of that stop. As you can see, the grid pattern on the left allows the person to get to many more destinations than the suburban type pattern on the right, which is more limited. Linearity is simply, are all the destinations on the route on a straight line? The more that they are on the straight line, the less deviations that the route needs to make, the faster that trip can be, and the less time anyone spends passing through other destinations waiting to get to the place they want to go. It's also more cost effective for us to operate because the bus is traveling fewer miles. Proximity is the last factor. The closer that origins and destinations are on the corridor, the more appealing that transit trip is. So we like shorter routes for cost effectiveness as opposed to longer routes where we have to go a longer distance and passengers will be less interested in traveling with us. So this is where I ask, is high ridership what you want? Because we can design a system designed to get ridership, but that means sacrificing other things, like proximity to transit, hours of the day when the transit is in service. A lot of these mobility measurements that don't necessarily get captured in a simple metric of ridership. So we're gonna ask you guys to do some live polling. Jay, can you put that up? And ask you some questions about how you would balance different priorities, such as frequency, hours of day. For example, for this question, or for this series of questions, we ask you to either get on some of the iPads that we've provided or pull out a smartphone and connect to pollev.com/scvta to participate in real time with us. So this first question is about frequency and span of service. So we can allocate our transit service throughout the day at different timings. We can bunch our service up in the peak periods, or we can stretch it out throughout the entire day. So I'm asking you, what do you value more? Is it frequent service that starts later and ends earlier? Or is it less frequent service that starts earlier and ends later? Frequency versus the total number of hours of day that the service is in effect. And you've got 5 voting options, neutral, and then 1 at each end, as well as partway between either of those. The votes are streaming in. So this crowd does not favor frequent service. Rather, you'd like to see service in later hours of the day. Can we go to the next question, Jay? Oh, there's one for frequency. Now it's evening out. Are there online participants? Great. It's still moving. What seems to be generally trending toward less frequent, but service that starts earlier and ends later. All right, let's go to the next one. So this question is about how VTA should allocate its service. Currently, weekday service levels are much higher than weekend service levels. Our Saturday service levels are about half that of weekdays, and our Sunday service levels are even lower than our Saturday levels. So the question we're asking is, should we keep that balance, or should we move more service toward the weekend, or should we concentrate even more on weekday? The crowd appears to be split on this one. Okay. Okay. Now we're moving back away from more weekend service. All right, so neutral is our winner here. I guess, oh, now it's tied. More weekday service, less weekend service. I think folks are having fun with this one. Well, now we have more weekday service, but less weekend. Oh. I'd say overall the general trend is more toward weekday service and less weekend service. How about we move it to the next one? I think it's stabilizing. So this one is about frequent service, and this is one of the big topics we'll be talking about later today. Would you rather have infrequent service, but that is direct, so you don't have to make a transfer, or would you prefer more frequent routes, but that require you to make a transfer? So far, no one is in the middle on this one. Now we have someone in the middle. I'm seeing a general favoring of frequent service, or somewhere in the middle but leaning frequent. Have we stabilized here? So 5 for frequent and 6 for other. Do you want to move it to the next one? So this one is about how far you are willing to walk. Often when we have parallel routes and you live between them or your destination is between them, you have to make a decision about which side to go to. Do you want the half-hourly service to the left or the half-hourly to the right? One option we have when we're designing the transit network is to merge both of those routes into a single route. You'll always go to one side, but you may have a longer walk to get there. However, it means that bus will be coming more frequently, like 15 minutes rather than 30. So would you rather have a longer walk to more frequent service or a shorter walk to less frequent service? Probably in a planning context, it would be a quarter mile versus a half mile. The question was, what does longer mean in this question? And the answer was about a quarter mile versus a half mile. All right. The crowd is pretty clear how they feel about this one. More willing to make a longer walk to frequent transit. How about we go to the next question? Can you advance us, Jay? So this is a question about stop spacing. So we have rapid routes in our system, like the 522, that stop approximately every mile, and we have local routes that stop approximately every quarter mile, like Route 22. Now, the 22 will have a shorter average walk from wherever you're starting to get to that bus route, but it won't travel as fast. On the other hand, you can have a longer walk to get to a faster route. How do you feel in terms of local service versus rapid service? Do you favor a longer walk to a faster route or a shorter walk to a slower route? And again, the crowd seems to heavily favor the longer walk to the faster route. Oh. Nobody wanting a shorter walk? All right, that looks pretty decisive there. Yeah. Oh, longer walk to faster routes continues to grow, up to 11 votes. I think that was our total on the last one, so maybe all votes are in. Can we move it to the next one? So this is a question about our current service levels by hour of the day. Right now, we offer more services during the morning and evening peak period. We have more buses on the street, but we see that our highest transit ridership occurs in the middle of the afternoon around the school bell. So should we continue focusing on the peak periods, or should we adjust to put more buses in the middle of the day compared to what we do now? And the crowd is split. tend to be favoring more service during the rush hour. Any last votes? Oh, now it's getting more even. Last call for votes. All right, back to 11. Slight favoritism for rush hour, but a sizable contingent for more bus service during the middle of the day. And our final question in this section, this is about where VTA should locate its transit ridership. This is a choice about, do we put more service in the corridors where we expect to get high ridership, or do we put service in as many places as we can, even if that ridership likelihood is lower? So far, the crowd is pretty heavily in favor of service everywhere, even if ridership is low. Even more so, 8 votes in. Sure. Last call for votes. All right, back up to 11, but clearly favoring more service everywhere, even if ridership is low. Next. Oh, and that is our final question of this segment. Can you send us back, Jay? So our final section this evening will be about the purpose of public transit. And one of the things that transit agencies are charged with doing is getting as much ridership as possible. That's about being as cost effective as we can be, getting as many people as possible, really approaching transit network design like a business. Think about an airline that decides which cities its planes are going to fly into. They don't want to go to the little cities where they know they're not going to get many passengers. But we're also charged with providing geographical coverage. Everybody pays taxes that fund the transit system, so shouldn't we put service a little bit everywhere so that everybody has access to it? And the difficulty is that these two goals are in direct conflict with each other. You can't do ridership and coverage at the exact same time. There's no route that serves both those purposes. So what we like to do is look at this in terms of how much should VTA focus on each goal? How much of our transit operating spending should we put toward the ridership goal, and how much should we put toward the coverage goal? Currently, a question in the end. Can you ask a question? Let's wait till the end. Maybe I'll answer it. Currently, about 70% of VTA's bus ridership goes to routes that have a ridership purpose, and about 30% go to routes that have a coverage purpose. If you remember from earlier, one of the things we're charged to do here in this project is increase ridership. So the question is, should we increase the amount of money that we spend on ridership-oriented routes at the expense of coverage-oriented routes? And that's not an easy question because both the coverage goal and ridership goal are admirable causes. So talking about percentages, 70-30, 80-20, that's difficult to imagine what that looks like. So we've developed 3 network concepts that look at what a 70-30 network would look like, what an 80-20 network would look like, and what a 90-10 network would look like. And we'll go through those maps in a second, but I want to put a little disclaimer out here about what you're seeing. So all of these maps expand weekend service so that the weekend service level that you'll see is the exact same as the weekday. This is a 7-day-a-week map and different from our current system in that sense. All of these employ a grid network type philosophy. Currently, we have more of a radial system where a lot of our routes bend into downtown San Jose, and that's the focal point. But as a lot of activity centers, a lot of downtowns are emerging, we think a more grid type network might be a better fit for the county and really allow those folks, especially those who aren't in downtown, to have multiple routes, multiple ways to get around, and more frequent ways to get around. All of these networks we're going to show you are different from our current network in that they connect to BART service. And I want to point out that they all use the same service hours. They would cost us the same to operate. They just spend those or allocate those buses in different ways. You're not going to see VTA Express service. Those are our highway buses on this map, nor VTA Flex service in North San Jose, or any of the Caltrainer ACE shuttles. We aren't touching those as part of this project. I assure you they're still there. For these maps, you'll have to understand 4 colors. These correlate to frequencies. The thick orangish yellow line is our rapid service. That is a limited stop service, wide stop spacing, and operates every 15 minutes or better. The red lines are local services that operate 15 minutes or better. The blue lines are local services that operate every 30 minutes, and the green lines operate every 60 minutes. So the key is warm colors are frequent and cooler colors are less frequent. So here's our first network. This is network 70. This has a 70-30 ridership coverage balance. And what you'll see is that the frequent services are concentrated in downtown San Jose, on the east side of San Jose, and then along the El Camino Real and Stevens Creek corridors. Around the more peripheral areas, the rural areas, you'll see 30-minute routes and 60-minute routes. This is the current balance of our network. Now I'll move it to network 80. As you can see, a lot of the green routes have disappeared. There are fewer green routes, but there are also more red routes. And you'll start seeing more of a red grid system, or red and orange grid system emerging in the western part of the county. I'll keep it going to network 90. Now all of the green routes are gone. There are much fewer blue routes, and that red route, those systems of red and orange routes have really increased. So let's go through those again. 70, 80, 90. 70, 80, 90. So this is the ridership coverage trade-off in action. As we move more toward ridership, the amount of coverage we provide disappears. And this means that a lot of areas would be without access to coverage services if we pursued the 90. And that's a big if. One of the questions we'll be asking shortly is, which of these balances do you think VTA should pursue? So I know when you're looking at a map, it's sometimes difficult to imagine what does that mean for my trip. So what we've put together is a series of maps. These are called isochrone maps, and they show if you were to drop someone at any point, and her name's Jane, we've dropped her at Mission College there, how far could she travel by transit and walking in 15-minute increments? And this is a map of liberty and opportunity for this individual. If they're a student at Mission College, where are convenient places for them to work? Where are convenient places for them to live? This is essentially their travel bubble. So here's our current network from Mission College. You can see that the transit access gets this person far south pretty decently, but not very well east or west. In our network 70, due to some new, more frequent services that we've added east-west, this blob gets a little bit differently shaped and has better east-west connections. The overall area in which this person can travel has expanded. Here's network 80, even bigger still, and network 90. And the reason these blobs get bigger is because they take into account the time you spend waiting to catch your bus or make a transfer. And the more frequent the network is, the better that frequent grid is, the less time they're spending waiting and the more time they're spending traveling. So here's current, 70, 80, 90. So let's look at that in a little bit different way. Each of these bars measures the entire number of jobs in Santa Clara County. It's almost 1 million jobs in Santa Clara County. And the red portion of the bar is how many of those jobs are within a half-mile walk of a frequent transit service. In our current network, you see about 40% is. I should say the blue and the orange are how many jobs are within a half-mile walk of some other transit service. The blue is all-day service at 30 or 60-minute frequencies, and the orange is our rush hour only service. The gray at the end are the jobs that do not have any transit service within half a mile of that location. As you move down from the current to network 70 to 80 to 90, you see that the frequent network increases, or the portion that are on the frequent network increases. But that comes at a cost because more jobs are now not in, or don't have any service to them. This is the ridership coverage trade-off in action. Do we want to make better transit service for some part of the population while reducing it for another part of the population? Here's the same kind of graphic, but with residents. You can see that as you move closer to 70, 80, 90, the number of residents who are on the frequent network increases, but it also comes at a pretty great cost to those who do not have any access at all. You can see that about 27% would not have any access to transit within half a mile at all. But I want to point out that while that seems like a big number, it's not representative of the actual people who would be in the transit market. These areas that lose service in Network 90 are like Almaden Valley, the outskirts of Morgan Hill, places where people typically are already quite auto-oriented, where the transit routes that we run there get few passengers. And so the actual human impact, as shown on this graphic, for Network 90 is relatively small. It would mean that only about 4% of our current riders would no longer have service, while the quality of service for most of our riders would become vastly better. So that's the question that we're asking, and I'll move it to the next set of polling questions, which is how do you feel about this Network 70, 80, 90? If you had the opportunity, if you were VTA's board of directors, what would you choose as the right balance between ridership and coverage? So let's get those votes in. Choose any number from 70 to 90. Yes.
You mentioned the route to Almaden.
Mm-hmm.
And, it stops right there at the Burger King
Mm-hmm.
by the Almaden, and it goes to the Almaden Library. Because sometimes I need to go to the library for a meeting for IBM. And the meeting starts at 5:30, and the last route's at 6. So the light rail's almost 4 or 5 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
Having a shuttle from the light rail in that area would probably be better instead of having it go all the way across town.
So you'd redesign that route.
Design that, put a shuttle that just stays in that area and services that area from the light rail station. Maybe run every hour and then stops at different locations just in that area. Instead of going all the way across town, like that one goes all the way down to the Dearden,
Mm-hmm.
or it goes down here to 7th Street, I think is the last stop. I think it's 63.
Okay.
So, and on the weekends, the hours to get to the library are ridiculous. So, it's hard to take that. The only time I've taken it on the weekend was to go to Councilmember Rocha's homeless activity event that he had at Branham High School. And that was useful to me during that time.
So your comment is touching on a lot of things, but the connectivity, the quality of the routing, that you think it could be better, and also the hours of service that Route 13 that goes to Almaden Valley currently operates in, that by ending early in the evening, you're leaving a lot of folks stranded from the rest of the network.
Yeah, if I want to go to the library, just go to an event Monday night, it's Tuesday night, there's nothing after 6.
Okay, so on our votes, more votes still rolling in. We seem to be of different factions, those that like the current balance, that are access or coverage oriented, those who are very aggressively ridership oriented, some in the middle, and then the rest are the majority scattered on the ridership oriented side. Oh, now we've got more for coverage proportionally. Can we see how many votes we have in total? All right, well, this was our final question of the night. I thank you for giving us all this input. This will all be supplied to our board of directors, and we will break it down by where we heard the information, by which venue. Your opportunity to give us input doesn't end tonight. We have a website set up specially for this project, nextnetwork.vta.org. We've got a number of surveys on there, lots more detailed information about what we've talked about tonight. Please share it with your friends, give us your input. If you can think of anything that you would like us to know as we do this, reach us at community.outreach@vta.org. This will conclude the official portion of our meeting, but we'll be happy to answer any questions afterward. Thank you.